Tole pa je 154. epizoda Aparatusa, v kateri sem že spet govoril z nekom, ki ne govori slovensko. Mislim, da imam po 17 letih že spet angliško epizodo. Tokrat je z mano govoril Mikah Sargent, ki piše za iMore. Jaz ga poznam tudi prek enih drugih podcastov. Res full fine model, ki veliko ve o stvareh, o katerih piše. Tako da so se pogovarjali o tem, kaj dela, zakaj je to začel delati in podobno. To vse slišali v pogovoru. Kot vedno, full hvala vsem, ki podpirate tale podcast. To naredite tako, da greste na aparatus.si poševnica podpri. Res full hvala vsem, ki ste tam poklikali in pa vsem, ki dajete ocene v iTunesih oziroma Apple Podcast, kot se zdaj temu uradno reče. Tako da full hvala. To je, kar se introta tiče to. Zdaj pa že spet angleščina v to. Mikah, evo. Ok, so my first question, which is always the same. We're doing this in English after so long. Who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? My name is Mikah Sargent. I am a podcaster and a writer and a creator, I think is the best way to describe it. I work for Mobile Nations, which is a company that owns iMore and Android Central and a few other places, and I'm a senior editor there. And I write about tech for those sites. I also do several podcasts, and it's become a running joke that I do too many podcasts, which is pretty much true. But yeah, between those things and a few other side projects, that's pretty much what I am. Other than, of course, an undying and unrelenting dog lover.
Yeah, we're in a Slack together, and that is like readily apparent, I think. The just genuine love for dogs.
They're great. They're great creatures. I can't help but I'm the person that every time I see a dog, I have to call out the fact that I've seen a dog. It's just how it works.
Yeah, I think you're like, it's sort of, you're a dog person. You're like the quintessential dog person. I think that's in the dictionary. You guys should be on there. But yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I think I would be, it's interesting talking about that because like cat people, I think they get a little upset because I'm not a cat person, and it's because I'm like super, super, super allergic to them. Really, really, really.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. Yeah. So if you weren't allergic, would you still love cats or dogs?
I think I would.
Oh, okay.
I think it'd be both. And like, I don't hate cats by any means. I just have to keep them at a distance so that I don't die is all.
Yeah, well, that's a good excuse almost. Okay, so back to the creating part. We should do sort of, this is sort of, it's called the Genesis question for me, but like, why tech, Mikah? Where did tech
why
come
tech?
From? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. So, tech has sort of been an underlying thing for me. I was always the techie in my family. I love to fix things. I genuinely love to there's a problem comes up, and I love to research it and try and find a solution for it. And that actually doesn't just pertain to tech for me. I'm also sort of a handyman, a handy person. Like I love to fix, like I do plumbing, I do all that kind of stuff. I really love fixing stuff. And when I was younger, my younger siblings, my mom and other people, my grandparents would come to me to ask me to help them fix their technology. And what's interesting is like, this was just sort of an underlying thing that I didn't really pay attention to. When I first went to college, I was convinced that I was going to go into advertising because I do like graphic design quite a bit and creating in that sense. And, my whole idea was that I would be a less, let's see, what's the term? I would be a more moral version of the dude from Mad Men. I can't think of his name at the moment.
Don Draper.
Yeah, Don Draper. I would be a more moral Don Draper. I wanted to be exactly what his job was, like working with other artists and coming up with these concepts and things like that. And so I went to school for that at first. And it was interesting because at the university that I went to, the advertising stuff was built into the journalism program, which is sort of odd, but it sort of makes sense too, because it's all sort of a communications type thing. But while I was there, I got a job at a company called Newsy. And this company was an online video news company. And I started out as a writer there. And then I started anchoring, in other words, like going in front of the camera and being an anchor, and also doing video production. And it wasn't too long before I took the lead of the tech team there. So I had several different tech writers, and led that team and built out Newsy's tech coverage. And it was suddenly this realization that like, this is something that I really do enjoy. And it's been something that's sort of been part of the back burner always in my mind at all times. And that's sort of where it was like, okay, this is what I should be doing. I think advertising was sort of a fun idea, but it was just, I think at the time, just me sort of trying to find something that made sense. But really what I liked doing was creating and putting things out into the world. And so I got to help people and put things out into the world all in one. And that's really where I think the interest in creating content about tech came from.
So yeah, I saw some of those Newsy videos when I first heard about you on podcasts. And then I think I started following you on Twitter, and I saw some of those Newsy. Did you have any apprehension about the whole being in front of the camera thing? I always ask that because I felt like even in Slovenia, I've had a bunch of people that do TV stuff. And that's always my question, just because it's my hang up. Being in front of the camera, it's still kind of weird to me. I'm getting better at it, but still kind of creeps me out. So how are you with that? Yeah.
Well, so when I was in high school, I did lots of speech and debate, like all throughout all of my years of high school, and and theater as well. And so I have sort of been blessed in the sense that I don't really have the stage fright hang up, which I do think can help sort of translate itself into not being uncomfortable in front of the camera. It is a different experience for sure. And when I first started doing it, because the way that it worked at Newsy is you sort of had to audition. And so you'd go up with somebody who was an on-camera person, and then you would train with them for a while. And then they either said yes or they said no. And it's funny, when I left there, I actually was the person who trained new anchors to come on to do it. So I had no apprehension. I also, it's funny, in high school, I did a web show with some friends of mine. And so we would record these videos. I would edit them and put them up, and we would do this like every week or something like that. So I sort of had a little bit of experience with quote unquote hosting, being on camera. And I learned a lot of stuff while I was there. But the thing that I wasn't prepared for, and the thing that sort of did make me uncomfortable being in front of the camera, was the creepy factor that I was not expecting. I got some, writing now without sort of having my face in front of things. And even like here in podcasting, the conversations that I've had have not compared at all with what it was like whenever my face and sort of my upper body showed up in front of videos. I remember getting, an email where a guy was essentially inviting me to come stay at his house for, it was this horribly creepy thing. And he described my voice as having, and I kid you not, this gross, like I'm getting shivers just think, sensual intonation. That's what I love your sensual. Yeah, exactly. So it was, it was not great. And that's when I was like, all right, I have to on Facebook, you can get messages, but then you also have the messages that are sort of stashed away in the other. And I sort of had to prepare myself anytime I clicked on that button, but that's gone away since I got off camera.
Oh yeah, I feel sleazy now just listening to that. So I just
I'm sorry, listeners out there too. We're all in this together, I guess.
Okay, so we can be maybe a little sappy now, but when you said just creating stuff and putting stuff out there and also helping people, like that's how I feel about when I review phones and computers and tablets and stuff. Sort of that aspect of, maybe helping someone make an informed, but purchasing decision, but maybe not even just purchasing decisions, maybe even the broader stuff about privacy. Like that's my primary motivation when I do anything tech related. So, cause I get that feeling from you with the stuff you care about and, the stuff you post on Twitter. Or am I wrong? Or, yeah.
No, I think you're dead on. So I honestly, when something that's always bugged me about many tech reporters that I've seen in tech journalism is that many of us genuinely lack empathy when it comes to reviews, when it comes to write-ups and things like that. I think it's this issue where they're so concerned sort of with how they feel about a product and how they're thinking about a product or, a news announcement or whatever, that they're not considering sort of how the everyday person will think about this. And the example that I always go back to is when the Apple Watch first shipped, and I'm no apologist or anything like that. I barely use my Apple Watch now, but I did have a criticism when the Apple Watch first shipped. There was a video from The Verge, and the person, I'm not going to, name names and all that kind of thing, but the person who was doing the review was complaining that he received so many notifications, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And not only is the fact that you can shut off notifications that you don't want, but the fact is that the everyday person is not going to be getting the tweet mentions that he was getting, the hundreds of Facebook messages and things like that, because he's in a position of popularity, and that plays into sort of how that worked. But I think that we can take for granted sort of what the everyday person thinks and how they sort of approach technology. And that's something that I'm always trying to keep in mind. And so when these stories come out about like Face ID on an iPhone being this creepy thing or whatever, and I had gone home the weekend after the Apple announcement, and there was this like different people in my family asking me about it and wondering what was going on there. And I'm explaining like this stuff happens on device, it's not sent off to a server somewhere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just genuinely do try to think about when I'm writing or when I'm sharing stuff that other people have written, like Renee, my boss, and it's thinking about my family and then other everyday people who don't necessarily have the resources available and also the experience available to understand how this technology works and how it, can be a bad thing or a good thing. Because in the end, like I hate seeing misinformation out there because I hate how that limits people's possibilities and like getting the most out of what they spend their money on.
Well, okay. So what, like just continuing on from that. So because you work at iMore, you're basically a proper sort of web publication, right? You're like you're not even digital first, you're just digital, right? There's no sort of, I work at the national broadcaster here in Slovenia now, and it's still sort of, there's TV, there's radio, there's a website, and then I do the website for the radio, and it's still, it's still all, sort of old media, trying to figure out new media most of the time. So this is just, I'm going to live through you now. Do you have any experience of sort of like traditional media, or have you just been online all the time? Because if you say that, I'm just going to, be envious even more, but.
I've never worked at, a newspaper or anything like that. Pretty much, when, my first big job in terms of publishing, was Newsy. Now, the interesting thing about Newsy, and something that was like way different from working, now at Mobile Nations and mostly writing for iMore, is that at Newsy, it was almost as permanent as newspaper or as like a live TV broadcast. And the reason I say that is because we would have different content distribution partners. And if there was ever a fact error or even just like a misspelling or something like that in a video, it would take all day to fix that error, because you would have to, there were certain content distribution networks where you'd have to email the people and say, we need to pull this video. There'd be people you had to call for it was just, we had a process in place where mistakes were very rarely made. And when they were, it was not a good thing, because it just threw a wrench into the whole kit caboodle. And so you were sort of out of commission for the day trying to fix that. And I remember when I moved to Mobile Nations and started working for iMore, I had messaged Renee and I said, hey, I just noticed that there'd been something that had updated in a story that I wrote. And I said, how do I go about changing that? How long is it going to take and all that kind of jazz. And he's like, oh, no, you just go in and you can fix it. And he's like, if it's just, a small thing, then you fix it. And if it's a big thing, then we, of course, will put a note in there that says, this has been updated to reflect blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you have no idea how awesome that is that I could just go in and fix things. So yeah, I've never done like the full on newspaper or anything like that. I've pretty much always been digital when it comes to content creation, but it's interesting going from one extreme to the other in terms of how the publishing works.
Yeah, see, I'm even more envious now. That's just yeah, so that's for me. But no, because the thing is, like, you guys sort of the American tech press, at least, there's a bunch of sort of pretty much well-established websites now that cover tech. They've been around for a while, like genuinely 5-10 years, some of them. But like, the thing is, like, do you actually, you see, I'm like having trouble phrasing it, but like, you guys give away all of your content for free, by pretty much, right? And then it's all ad based and stuff. And like, how like, does that ever worry you? Like, just as a guy that has a job, do you know what I mean? Because it's not like, you're just, so how does that work into your, just everyday life? Because that's the thing I can't get my head around.
I'm in a constant state of panic. No, but it's funny that you bring that up, because I'm not going to lie to you. It's something that I have. As I've gotten older, it's something that I've thought about more. When I was working at Newsy, I was sort of happy-go-lucky and didn't really consider sort of how the finances worked out. I just did my job and just made it happen. But for some reason, that's something that's more front of mind. Absolutely, it's as you hear about sort of where Apple has gone with Safari and ad blocking and ad tracking and stuff like that, and even Google Chrome, and people constantly coming in revolt of different ways that ad tracking networks and stuff like that work. And it all is like perfectly reasonable and perfectly logical and makes sense. What it is for me right now, like the thing that gives me sort of comfort, is that I think whenever you work at a smaller company, it's almost like working on a ship, in the sense that you can feel the winds change and you can be alert to the fact that things, are different, and suddenly you've got to brace yourself and, billow the sails, or whatever the different terms are for sailing. There's not been that experience. Like, everything seems to be fine for now, and we certainly have our roots, and it's okay. But I think if, one day that day did come and I started to see content that was like, hey, subscribe to this, and then you can get, I don't know, Renee's opinion articles in a newsletter or something, then I think we would be ready for that. But for right now, everything seems to be okay. And, I think some online publications rely more on, like the Wirecutter is an example of one that relies more on commissions, from product purchases. And I think that our company has done a good job of sort of, balancing out the way that the finances come in. And I think we're a lot smaller than people realize too. And that's like something that's always been front of mind for me, is working in publication, working for a smaller company seems to be better than working for a big company, not just because of the financial aspect of it and sort of the being able to sort of be aware and feel the threads of everything, but also sort of in an ego way where you don't feel like you're just this tiny cog in the machine. You feel like, you're contributing more to the company, which selfishly is something that I have always enjoyed, rather than sort of just like, okay, here's your job for the day and go home and we'll see you later. It's fun to sort of be part of the whole experience and help shape the company.
Yeah, see, the reason I'm interested in stuff like that is because over here, like we're a country of 2 million people. So like, you do the math, how any kind of online advertising could possibly, it doesn't work, honestly.
Right.
Like, it really, there's no, like, even like if it's a team of people and they sort of start a website, I just don't see it sort of like surviving or even being able to support itself. It's kind of that's why I'm fascinated, because I do know that like iModern Mobile Nations like is not the biggest sort of operation in the world. That's why I'm sort of interested, just for you as someone who works there. I do like that phrasing with you can feel the winds change, which I guess you have, but at least you guys have wind the changes. Like over here, it's
just one way. It's one. Well, so let me ask you then. I'm curious. So working for the sort of the newspaper and things like that, or the broadcast network, and is that then something that's financed by government? Is that something that's financed by subscriptions?
Yeah, I used to work for a political magazine, and that was basically subscriptions. So it was still like a physical magazine. We had like a website. I was the online editor. So that basically still does run off of just people paying for the thing, right? But where I work now, it's the national broadcaster, and we basically have the BBC model where like everybody just pays a fee and that goes into the whole system, not just the broadcaster, but the infrastructure as well. So that's
gotcha.
So I'm actually kind of like web wise, I'm actually kind of calmer now, because I know there's we also, because we do a public service, we get to everything we do is free for people, which I genuinely enjoy, because people don't want to part with their money online.
They do not. You're absolutely right. And that's really cool that there's a certain level of comfort that exists there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, it's a sort of it's the philosophy of, sort of the whole country or the government. I guess in Europe, it's a little different, because over there with you guys, PBS basically just runs off of donations, which I think is just a travesty, honestly.
Oh, but, yeah. I agree.
It's just in the sort of, what NPR, I'm sort of more interested in radio, what NPR has been able to do is kind of amazing. The pockets in the network that have kind of made it gone digital first, in all honesty. Podcasting is in their domain as far as I'm concerned. So it's kind of amazing to me that they've been able to do that with that sort of no like recurring subscription model. Although they do give away a lot of tote bags, so I guess people are giving them money. I don't know.
We're completely financed by the kinetic energy created when people move those tote bags around.
Yeah. The more you use an NPR tote bag, the more money they get. I think that's how it works.
That's how it works.
Yeah, there's no other explanation.
I'd rather be like financed by tote bags though than to have this sort of dread hanging over me of okay, what happens today that the I don't know, the hammer drops? I don't know what the idiom is, but that does certainly concern me. I think that a lot of people who are in journalism, they sort of take two routes with things. They're either very quiet about all of it and just sort of like go on about their day and don't really bring it up and sort of just kind of, it's in the back of my mind, but I'm not going to talk about it. Or they are sort of talking about what comes next, what can we do next, yada, 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 yada. And for me, I think for the longest time, it certainly was something that I just didn't have front of mind, but is something that I consider now. But everything seems to be okay. And like I said, there's no shift in the winds, at least, which is nice. But it's interesting, too, to see sort of how other huge sites like The Verge and CNET and different companies like that, how they are handling things and how they're going forward. Because some of those sites are owned by huge companies, and Mobile Nations is still like a family-owned operation, which is a fascinating thing, because for the size of sort of our viewership and listenership, it's kind of neat that we still sort of work for, at the end of the day, a small family, and then it goes out from there. So I like that aspect of it, because again, I can't get into too much detail about Newsy, because I can't get into too much detail there, but it was interesting seeing things change from when it was just a startup that was being run by a guy who, owned the company, versus when it was purchased by Scripps. That I can say it was bought by Scripps, which is it's an old company in the United States that owns like a bunch of newspapers and web broadcast companies. And things, the winds shifted essentially when that happened. There were a lot of changes that took place, and it was a different experience at that point. And so sort of jumping back into something that was once again owned by a couple people, and having that was really nice. It was kind of nice to get back into that, because there's just a big difference between being owned by a big company that has to find different ways of making money and is more is less, I guess, sort of paying attention to individuals and more paying attention to the viewer count and like the financial situation. So it's a big difference between those two. And I think different publications handle it differently. And I certainly don't envy tech writers who work at some of these huge companies and are trying to sort of make their way there.
Yeah, well, the bigger the company gets, the weirder things get. Like, that's been my experience so far. So yeah, I totally understand that. Okay, so jumping back a little, when you said you fixed your like family's technology even way back when, right? So I'm guessing you built your own PCs, or how did, I'm just going off of the iMore, so I guess you're more in the Apple camp, or how did that start?
Well, growing up, so I grew up, poor is not the right word. We were not wealthy in any sense of the word. We lived very modestly, I guess is a good way to put it. And so affording something like an Apple computer when I was younger was not something that's going to be possible. And so my stepdad was a trained like computer technician. And so he taught me a bunch of stuff when I was younger. And I never had a full PC build or anything like that when I was a kid. But what I did do was buy different cards for like the PC that I had purchased, or that my family had purchased. And I would, when I'd get money for helping out by mowing the lawn at my grandparents' house or whatever, I'd save it up, and then I would buy like a new video card, or I'd buy more RAM and things like that. So I always did, crack open my computer and take it apart and pull out the PCI cards or PCI slots and everything like that, and stick new stuff in. So growing up, I ran Windows, and it's funny because my grandparents, as a graduation gift, I think from middle school, anyway, I got a laptop, a Dell laptop, and I had just gotten an iPod Touch for Christmas that year. So I took the sticker that came in the iPod Touch and put it on the back over the Dell logo. And it was just sort of my one day. But yeah, I mean, I would, my siblings then would have computers and things like that. And if something wasn't working, or they got a virus because they were so irresponsible about that kind of thing, I would help them and get that fixed out. And I loved doing that. And I could sit for hours, like trying to figure out what was going on and solve the problem. And sort of one of those things where once it was right in front of you, I couldn't stop until I had it fixed. And that was always a fun thing to do. And again, it wasn't, once I went off to college, the first laptop, that was whenever I first was able to get an Apple computer. I was able to get a MacBook Pro. And some of that was like with scholarship money and stuff like that. So I was able to afford it, but it was, it's interesting going from that sort of, plug and play nature where you're just like popping out cards, sticking in new Ethernet cards and things, to this sort of locked off world where you don't upgrade except every couple of years whenever you buy a new one.
How was that? Because I've never made that jump. Like
So you've always...
Yeah, I'm still on Windows because I can't. Like I just bought a new computer, I guess, like 4 months ago, and I just almost talked myself into a MacBook Pro. Like I was right there, and then I just saw the price, and I just couldn't. Like I just could not. Because I saw what I could get if I just built a box for me. Because I don't really like walk around with my computer. So the MacBook Pro would basically just sit on my desk, hooked up to a monitor, and then maybe I'd take it around a couple of times, right? So, but then I saw what I could do if I just built my own, and it over here at least, there's no contest, just no contest.
Well, yeah, and I remember you saying that it's like way more expensive, the way that it shakes out.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's also we do have a an authorized reseller on Apple, but we don't have an Apple store. So that's also kind of a factor, with supplies and then warranty and stuff. Like they'll fix stuff. Don't get me wrong. We're not like without anything. There is a difference, and most of my friends that have MacBook Pros have, let's say, brought them over from America when the dollar was not doing particularly well.
Smart.
Yeah, that kind of works out. But yeah, I just couldn't. Okay. So back to my question, like, how was that? Just going from Windows to going to the Mac? Because when you can tinker and stuff, and then you're on a Mac.
Right. Well, so the interesting thing is, like, when it came to with computers and with that sort of technology, I was always more fascinated with the software than I was with the hardware. I did like, as I was mentioning, like swapping out cards, but really where all of like the problems came up was in the software and trying to fix things there. And so that, there's still stuff that you can do when things go wrong, or even if it's not going wrong, just like tinkering and adjusting settings and things like that. And yes, you do not get as much control over everything in Mac OS that you do in Windows. But I had been so doggone, I don't know, essentially lusting after, owning these Apple products. Like, I need to own an Apple product. And so when I did, like, it was a cool thing. I was so happy about it. And it didn't really, I was okay with losing sort of that freedom that comes with owning a PC and getting the option to sort of upgrade it how I wanted to. And since then, like, I don't have enough time really to do, the tinkering and stuff that I used to do. So it's okay for me now. It's like, hey, I don't have to worry about that as much. The only time that things are ever really an issue with macOS mostly is like when I'm running beta software and when I'm jumping between different betas. And so it's okay for me. I didn't feel like I had lost a whole lot. In fact, I felt like I gained something because it was, sort of like a point of pride where I had gotten to, I was a first generation college kid. And so, for people who are across the pond who might not know what that means, basically, if your parents or anyone in your family didn't go to college before, and you're like the first one in your line of family to go to college, then that's a first generation college kid. So, it was like, I've done this thing, I've made that jump. And then also now I have this piece of tech that was like a status symbol for me. So again, it was sort of an ego thing for sure. But, it was an exciting moment for me, and I was happy to, have that. And like I said, there's still things that go wrong and still things that can be fixed. It's just usually more software based.
Yeah, you should do a throwback and get a Dell sticker now. And just
you're right.
just put like a black Dell sticker over.
Oh my God, I gotta look that up now. Vinyl Dell sticker.
Yeah. I'm sure you can get like 17,000 of them for like
right.
Yeah, there's not going to be a shortage of those probably, but yeah. Okay, so going into mobile, since we need to talk about the stuff you actually do day to day, right? So where do you see sort of the mobile space now when just like right on the heels of Windows Phone going away, basically? Right, and I guess you're more in the Apple ecosystem, but are you okay with that? With just the two OSs? Like I won't even ask you like that. I'll just ask you, how bummed are you that there are only two OSs? Like, I'll just ask that.
Look, I think competition is an incredibly important factor in producing really cool stuff. And so I'm always going to be an advocate for more over less when it comes to choice and when it comes to the different people. I mean, we're also different, and we like different things, and we use things differently. And there's a reason that Windows Phone was around, and there's a reason that Android exists, and there's a reason that iOS exists. And a lot of that is based in what people like and what they're comfortable with and what they want to try. And so I'm always it's upsetting whenever things go away. The comparison, this is an interesting comparison to make, but it's one that I think holds some reasonable reasonability. I don't know. Anyway, my point is, in my town that I live in, there are, I kid you not, like 6 or 7 different trash services. You can go online and like type in the name of my city and type in trash, and it's like 8 different websites trying to offer you a trash service. And because of that,
wait, just hold on there.
Go ahead.
So trash services are people that take your trash away?
Oh, yeah. So,
what? Is that not like a municipality of the city? I don't understand.
No. See, that's the thing, is that in some places so it's all different, all across the state and all across the country. At some places it's done by the city. At some places it's done by like the state. At some places it's just, individual businesses that do it. And here it's individual businesses. And so, I hopped online and I looked around and was able to find a good deal, because they're all competing against each other. So you get, a giant barrel and you get the recycling bin, and you don't pay too much because they're all competing. Now, interestingly, my city is trying to turn it into a municipality thing where you pay for it as part of your sort of utilities. And people were upset about that because the competition was lost. I think the same thing applies. The trash services and the operating systems, it's the same thing. Like, the more there is out there, the more they're sort of competing with each other and fighting against each other. And good ideas exist across all these different companies because it's coming from individuals and teams of people who are coming up with these ideas. And so, I never used a Windows phone device, but there's a member of my family who uses one, which is fascinating to me. I didn't think that I would ever know anybody who did personally or anything like that, but it's like, regardless of the popularity or anything like that, I think that the competition is healthy. And now that you sort of have 2 options to choose from, although Android can of course be split into its different parts for Samsung and Essential and all the different companies that exist there, it still does suck. Yeah, I think it sucks. What about you? Are you good about it or feel bad about it?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't go. I like totally disagree with the municipality and private business analogy. Like, I just don't. That just seems awful to me. Like, you actually have to like, even the fact that you have to think about who is gonna take your trash away, that just boggles my mind. Honestly, like, just see, it's the same thing. We're gonna that I don't agree with, but yeah, I do agree with that. It's sad that it's just 2 companies. But I think like a mobile OS is different than like people taking your trash away, because that's just supposed to. Yeah, that's just supposed to happen. And if you live in some sort of community, you kind of hope that gets taken care of by the community, right, through taxes and stuff. But so that just really boggles my mind. Because the thing is, we're gonna get what you're totally used to in America. So every gas station has different prices. Right, in America, which just drove me crazy every time I'm there. That's just the most moronic thing ever. Like, over here, there's like a semi sort of state-owned petroleum company that runs half of the gas station, then another private company that runs the other half, and the price of gas is determined by the state, pretty much. That's sort of a short. So any gas station you go to, the price is the same, but that's about to end, and I just hate it so much that that's going to end. Because you can just imagine not worrying about that. Just imagine.
That would be nice.
Yes. And it's like gas. It's the one business where money literally just comes from the ground. It's not like, they don't, like, I don't know, when all of the gas stations are built out, I think it can be done with competition. Maybe. That's just my opinion. But yeah, that's so. But yeah, going back to the mobile OS, yeah, it kind of sucks. Because it's just going to be like iOS and Android, and Nokia basically went away, which is a really pain point for me, because Nokia was awesome. Like, the hardware design and stuff was just great. So yeah, kind of bummed about that. Okay, one more thing about the future in mobile and stuff. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the Apple Watch and all of the wearables. Like, so you're also there. Like, how is it? Are they a thing finally? Are wearables a thing finally? That's because, you see, I convince myself, like, 1 month I'll be like, okay, so this is it now. Okay, they just got wireless. I've tested a bunch of Android watches that had like a SIM card slot and stuff, right? So I'm like, okay, this is a thing now. And then it kind of, when the hype dies down from the event, you're back to, Not a lot of people actually use them. Some people use them, but not really the way that it's intended to. It's just a fancy watch and maybe some like a fitness tracker, maybe more a step tracker than a fitness tracker. So like, what's your view on wearables?
So I think that some people absolutely get a bunch of use out of them, but I think that's some people. I don't think that, for me personally, my Apple Watch is it's a way to control my like music from a distance. Like when I'm listening on a Bluetooth speaker or something like that, and I might not have my phone in my pocket. It's a way to control that. It's a way to shut off alarms at a distance, and it's a way to see notifications while I'm out and about. And of course, to tell the time. Like the main thing that I use my Apple Watch for is genuinely to look down and see what time it is more than anything else. That said, I know a lot of people get fitness stuff out of their Apple Watches or their other wearables. And it's interesting sort of out in the world seeing, like, I think Fitbit, it really does capture that fitness tracking audience. I see more everyday people wearing a Fitbit than I do see them wearing an Apple Watch. That said, I think that it's still in its infancy, and we're not to a place now where, in the same way that we carry our iPhones with us everywhere, that people are carrying, are so into wearables that everybody is using them and everybody's having them. They're still so new in the sense that it's just now that a friend of mine, her mom was asking me about the Apple Watch and wanting to know more about it and thinking about getting one and what it meant and how she could use it. And it's only been, since like the second iteration of the Apple Watch that my own mom was talking about it and interested in it. And I name these people because to me, they're people who aren't as sort of steeped in technology as I am, and who are just sort of, they have tasks and jobs that exist outside of the world of tech. And I think that's whenever you start to see, okay, now it's sort of reaching the mainstream. People are paying attention to it. So I think it's still new, but I do think that, I was sort of meh about the cellular addition to the Apple Watch. But as more and more people are getting these cellular Apple Watches and talking about how they really do love the fact that they could just like go to a place and just have their watch on and still get their messages and things like that, it starts to show me a future where I think wearables are going to make more sense as we can sort of untether ourselves from the screens that we keep in our pockets or keep on our desk or wherever. I think that's going to be a big thing. And so, yeah, I think that, wearables just barely have the jump on sort of voice activated operating systems, which is another huge trend that I think is going to really take off. So it's going to be, I think between those two, and probably some AR and VR thrown in there too. That's
been a trend as well. Just throwing AR and VR at the end, sort of just hedging our bets. Like everybody in tech just says, the future, maybe some AR and VR, maybe, you sort of have to mention them so you don't look like you're down on them.
Right, we know they're there. It's just, I'm sure there's going to be something, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's just hedging our bets, basically. Okay, before we go to your hardware and software, I do have one more question. What's your accent? Because I can't... your accent, I don't know what that accent is.
Okay, it's interesting because, again, this is one of those things where empathy is an issue because I think that a lot of Americans don't realize they have an accent. And there was an exchange student who came from Moldova whenever I was in high school. And she was like the first person to make me aware of the fact that, Americans have accents too, you dumb American. Like, she was so sweet, but it was sort of this awakening for me where I was like, of course, that's just a factor. So I have lived in the Midwest for almost all of my life. Like, I was born here in the Midwest. So, of course, you're from a different country, so that doesn't quite make sense. I live in Missouri, which anytime in the United States, when someone says Missouri to someone who doesn't live in Missouri, they say, "Don't you mean Missouri?" Because they think that it's like this super southern country or super southern state. It's not. There's some people here who talk like this and have a bit of a southern accent, but that's not me. Mine is more here. Now, interestingly, because of speech and debate and theater and things like that, there are words that I came to understand I was using with more of an accent that I've sort of tried to neutralize. And interestingly, too, many of the broadcasters, the anchors on major news stations in the U.S. come from the Midwest. And so the Midwestern accent is sort of all over the United States in the sense that it shows up in a lot of news broadcasts, like local news and things like that. So it's more pervasive, and that's because it tends to be the most neutral, sort of in the Chicago, Chicago and Illinois, Missouri area is this Midwestern accent, and of course, the more southern you go, the more you start to talk like this, and you got a little bit of an accent on there. But here in Upper Missouri, we don't have quite this accent.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's because I can't play because. Obviously, I'm not a native English speaker, if that's not apparent. Like, it's kind of, I do pick up like American accents, but they're sort of, they need to be really pronounced for me to sort of get it, because otherwise it just sounds like American English. But yours is, I kind of hear the southern accent sometimes in there, but like most of the time it's not there. I couldn't make sense of it. So yeah, thank you. That makes sense, I guess. The Midwest. Okay. I'm going to remember that now. Because it made not, because sometimes I think, the cliche is you sounded like somebody from Texas. That's not a slight. I'm just saying how it looks.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. And then other times it looks like you talk like somebody from the North, basically. Yeah. And I just couldn't make, okay. Because sometimes I thought you were Canadian at first for some reason, which I know makes no sense. But I just figured, okay, so it's North America, but maybe it's not America. Like, that was my thing. But then you say,
funny.
Yeah, you say about, then they say a boot, right? So that kind of tipped me off. Yeah.
Well, that's funny. And sorry instead of sorry.
Yeah,
I say sorry.
Yeah.
So the Midwestern accent, I think, it's sort of a melting pot accent, and that's sort of why it tends to be the one that makes it onto news broadcasts, because it's a comfortable thing. It sort of feels, it's hard to place, but it's also just, it's got a little bit of everything almost. And so it's a little bit easier to hear someone who speaks with that accent.
Yeah, it's sort of generic, but in a good way. Like,
yeah.
All right.
Hopefully in a good way.
Okay, so this is the last portion of this thing. So your hardware, your phone, your tablet, your computer.
So I used to use a 9.7 inch iPad Pro, and that was hands down my favorite device that I've ever had. Now I have a 10.5 inch iPad Pro. It's not different enough from the 9.7 that I consider it like, a whole new separate piece of technology. They're sort of the same thing in my mind. And essentially what it boils down to is, when I would read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, this is my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like, this is the sort of in-between computer that I've always wanted. I love my iPad Pro. And I think it's the perfect size and form factor and stuff like that. Right now I'm rocking an iPhone 7 Plus. And I plan to be up late at night. What is that? The coming week, to order. Oh, I guess that's 2 weeks from today, to order the iPhone 10. And if I don't get that, then I'll stay on stay in the Plus Club, as Mike Hurley of Relay would say, and get an iPhone 8 Plus. Yeah. For my computer, I use it's the last MacBook Pro before they started making the one that has the touch bar. So, it's a mid 2015 Retina MacBook Pro. But like you said, it would be for you if you had one. Mine mostly sits at my desk. It's plugged into a dual monitor setup, and I run it in clamshell mode most of the time. So I'm looking at you on 2 Dell monitors. So Dell still does play a part in my day-to-day workflow.
Okay, so software-wise, I'm just going to ask, like, the 5 apps you actually use in your phone. So the 5.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
The five main apps that I use are, hands down, Twitter. For me, that's an of course kind of thing. Airmail is my mail app of use. I love Airmail. I don't know where I'd be if I didn't have Slack.
Yep.
Slack is just, it's where I do my work and it's where I do my fun, like communicating with friends. So that's 3. Pocket Casts is my app of choice. Yeah, I love Pocket Casts. And of course, Russell is awesome. Russell Ivanovich of Shifty Jelly. Okay, I'm like looking at all these apps and now they've got this like puppy dog eyes look at me like, you have to choose me as the 5th one. Okay, so I would say Fantastical, which is me sneaking that in there. But I'm going to say the Home app for iOS because I am super big into home automation.
Yeah.
And so I use that app every day to control. I don't really like to do I don't like to use Siri for voice control of my smart home stuff. I have an Echo. I have a couple Echoes in the house and a Google Home device, but I will use the Echo to control my stuff. But for some reason, I just don't like to use Siri to control my stuff, and so I use the Home app for iOS. So yeah, that has to take the 5th spot because I'm pretty much always using that app.
All right. So this is my last question.
Okay.
If you had to pick one physical thing, so it has to be a thing, not your grandma or something. That sort of made an impact on your life, something that you like feel was made for you. You might still have it, you might not. It doesn't matter. It can be anything, honestly, anything, but it needs to be like a physical object. What would that be?
Something that was made for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
You see, I live for these silences. It's my favorite part of my show. Okay, sorry. Go.
Oh no, that's okay. I know what it is, and it's it was an iPod Nano.
Okay.
So it was this beautiful, beautiful emerald green iPod Nano. Green is my favorite color. And there was some sort of event that had taken place at school that I think I had just we'd wrapped production on a play or something like that. And I never thought that, again, like I said, we lived pretty modestly, and I never thought that I would have an Apple device the whole time that I lived at home, essentially, and wasn't, making my own income. And I came downstairs, and on the stairs was a little wrapped gift, and my mom had said it was for me. I opened it up, and like I said, green's my favorite color, and I opened it up and it was this beautifully, just the way that it shined in the light. I loved that thing. And it was so svelte, so tiny. It's like the size of the, Siri remote for the Apple TV. And just the click wheel and, the headphones right in the package, all that stuff, that was it was the perfect amount for me of showing off without doing too much showing off, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is sort of how I tend to sort of live my whole the way that I sort of approach the world is I don't mind being out there, communicating and talking and putting myself out there, but at the same time I'm also a little bit reserved in that sense. And so this device sort of embodied all of those things. And plus at the time it had a little camera on the back, and so I was able to shoot video and take photos with it. And so it's just this little device that was my first real introduction to sort of an all-in-one thing, because I didn't have a phone at the time. And so, there was no mobile devices or anything like that. And so this was the first one that had all of that stuff built in. And man, I still wish I had that thing today and I also wish Apple would bring back that green color. It was so beautiful, so beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of good feels tied to that little thing.
Yeah. But back when Apple actually did stuff in color. I miss those.
Right.
Days. Yeah.
Yes. What happened to those days?
Oh no, it's all supposed to be black, gray, and silver, and then 3 versions of gold, which are pretty much the same unless you look at it at a certain angle. So yeah.
It's so funny now because they just have the one in the phone and in the Apple Watch. They have one called gold, and it's it's like a mixture between rose gold and gold. And I saw a couple people complaining. They're like, I did not want this pink device. And I like the rose gold because again, it's there's at least some color option. So I've always my iPad Pro comes in rose gold. My iPhone 8 Plus is in rose gold. Just because it's different, but it was funny sort of seeing people get that. And then, because there was one guy who was so upset, he came out of the store and like in the light, the color changed from this copper to a more pinkish tone. And because of the toxic masculinity that exists in the United States, he was worried that everyone was going to judge him because he had a pink phone. So he's like, I'm keeping the case on it forever. I'm so mad, blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, brother, that's silly. But anyway, yeah, I wish Apple would be more colorful.
Mikah, thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, this is it. So where can people find you?
Well, if you're looking for me online, you can find me on Twitter at Mikah Sargent. But if you're looking for all of the things I do, I kid you not, you can go to www.chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUAHUA.coffee. And that's just a link to all of the different stuff that I do.
I know. I always ask that question at the end, but I was especially waiting for you to say that because, like, yeah. Because it's kind of it ties it together with the start with the dog lover stuff. So it kind of puts a bow on the whole conversation. Yeah,
it's the two things that I love so much: Chihuahuas and coffee. They're both great things.
yeah. There's a coffee place called Chihuahua that just wants to buy that domain. You know that.
You're probably right. Oh man,
there's a coffee shop in Des Moines just angry at you.
Oh God, I love it. I can't wait. Get in touch. Maybe I'll sell it. No, I won't.
That's pretty much it. So bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Tole je bila 154. epizoda Aparatusa. Majko najdete na Twitterju pod afna Mikah Sargent. Raj pogledajte link, ne vem, če znam to črkovati v pravic povedan. Res full fine piše za iMore, oni se bolj obadajo z iOS napravami, sicer je pa v tem Mobile Nations mini konglomeratku medijskem so tudi Android strani, tako da si jih pojete pogledati. Kot ponovadi, full hvala vsem, ki podpirate ta podcast, dajte oceno iTunesih ali pa ga delite, če vam je bil cool, tako da full hvala. To je več ali manj to. Do naslednjič. To sem zdaj, ker sem pozdravil leta 1700. Čau.